Hey everyone, so in this video we are going to look at the second part of the request that was made, and in some ways it's the opposite of the previous video, because in the previous video, when an object was going to be manufactured, we reduced our on-hand supplies by whatever was going to be taken to manufacture that object. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to increase our supplies based on a shipment received from one of our suppliers. Now, while that might seem to be pretty simple, there's actually one wrinkle to it. And that is the quantity in which you receive something, the measurement of quantity you receive, one barrel, one spindle, one package, is not the measurement in which you really need to track in your supplies. You're not going to track that you have a box of this. You're going to track that you have 50 widgets inside of it. You're not going to track that you have one spindle of wire. You're going to track that you have 43 centimeters of wire, because that's how it gets consumed, not per spindle, but per measurement unit. So to make this work, we're just going to have to add a simple conversion of the receiving unit versus the consumption unit. So first we're going to need to add a little more information to our supplies table. We're going to open that up, and I did mention this in the last video. I said that this was bare bones just to meet the needs of the last video, that you're actually going to store a lot of information, such as maybe the price per unit, maybe the whoever the supplier is, maybe their location. Well, in this case, we're going to add that per unit conversion. So per unit of shipment of this, how many pieces does it break down into? So we go to View, Design View, and we're going to add per underscore unit, and this will also be a number. Wants to be saved. And now we just have to put in numbers. So say 50, 10, and 40, and 100. And what we'll do is we'll just bring these all to 100, just so it's easy math. It's late at night and I don't feel like adding. Okay, so let's close this table. And now what we're going to do, we're going to create the form. So create blank form. Again, we're going to shut off the record selectors. I think it's a good habit to get into. Always lock down your database. We go to Design, Property Sheet, Format, Record Selector, no. Navigation button, no. And now what we're going to do, we're going to add the combo box. So we're going to click on this. We're going to draw it out. Now we're going to do the opposite of what we did in the last video. In the last video, I said it's generally best practice to link to a table. I just didn't feel like going through the trouble of creating a table. I figured it would be a bit of a distraction from the core functionality that we're looking at. In this case, we have the table that we need. We want to have the supplies that are listed in the supply table. We don't have to manually enter those, particularly because in a real manufacturing scenario, you're going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of supplies. So you definitely don't want to manually be storing those within the combo box. You want to have like a master table that when you change it, all these other references will change. So you're going to keep the top choice, do next. That's the only table we can link to. If you had multiple tables, they'd all be listed out. We only want the supply field. Actually, we could use, then we'll leave per unit there. We won't bring per unit over. We can just reference that without actually bringing it over. We'll do next, next. You can make this wider in case you think you're going to have longer names in the future, because if you don't, they'll get cut off. Next, finish. Let's take this, move it over up here, not that it really matters. And let's just watch this running. So let's change this to receive, do OK, click on view, And there you go. So if you have 10,000 entries here, all 10,000 will be available. You don't have to retype anything. If you remove something from here, it'll disappear from here. You add something to here, it'll appear here. So again, the only reason why I mainly added it last time was because I didn't want to go through the trouble of creating a table. But now you've seen both ways. You've seen how you can add to you can link to a table, or you can just internally start in the combo box. So now we are going to use this as the criteria for a query, but we're not going to create the query just yet. So we have the resource that we want to update. We don't want to update that record, but we need to know how many units have been received. So let's go back to View, Design View, and this time we will just use a text box. Put it there. We'll just select both of them. We'll move them over. I really haven't cared about desktop publishing in this particular series because, again, I don't want to get distracted with cleaning things up visually when that has zero impact on the actual functionality. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to add a button, but then we're going to go over to the query before we actually link anything to the button. So we're going to click on our command button, place it, and we're just going to cancel out. And you can call this whatever you want. Receive and convert. And again, keep in mind that this is simply a caption. It does nothing. It's just information for your end user. So now that we have this, we should be able to make our query. So this is going to be a little bit messy to look at. We're going to click on Create, Query Design. Again, we only have one table. We're going to change it to an update query. That's essential. And then again, you see the query change that now has a criteria and update to field. We need the supply field. We need the supply amount because this is being used for the criteria. This is what's being updated. Technically, we're using this, but we don't have to bring it down here. So the criteria we said is supply. So this is going to be right-click, build, database, form, all forms, and there's that new receive. We said we're going to take the value from the combo box, which makes a lot of sense because this is querying the supply table. The supply field is what's feeding into that combo box, and therefore it would make sense that we'd bring it back to look at this value here. Now for the supply amount, this is the part that's going to look messy. So we want it to be equal to its current value, okay, because we're going to increase it. So update to build database table supplies. So we want it to be equal to its current supply amount, but then we want to add something to that. So plus, so the current value that's in there plus the, go back to form, all forms, the receive form. We want to use the text to field, if I recall correctly. But we want that to be multiplied by the per unit. Because remember, the received amount is 1 box, 2 gallons, 3 containers, and that we're converting it into how many units are within each of those. So multiplied by, and we go back to our supplies table. So this is the part that looks messy because you're both referencing things on the form, things in the table, and other things in the table. And this was times per unit. So let's see if that looks right. So the current supply amount plus the result of the per unit that is in this record times the amount entered in the form. That looks right. So we're going to do OK. I'm going to save this. We're just going to call it query 2. We really haven't been given the queries any kind of special naming. And now we simply have to reference that query. So we're going to click on our button. We're going to click on Event, on click. Now in this case, I think we're going to use a macro. I'm not too fond of macros. I'd rather type it out in Visual Basic, but this is pretty much a turnkey operation. So macro builder it is. If nothing else, it gives you exposure to this. Drop down arrow, we're doing an open query. That is, we're opening a query, excuse me. And we're opening query 2. Save it, close it, and if I haven't made any mistakes, that should work. Like I said, the most complex part is getting your mind around that calculation. So we'll save the form, we'll go to view, but before I make any changes, we'll just quickly check what we've got. So we said each one is 100. So let's start with resource B. It's an increment of 10. So it starts off as 100 with 10. So resource B, and let's say we've got 3 of them. So it should come out to 130 if I didn't make any mistakes. Receive and convert. Yes, you're updating one row. Yes, so we said 130. Spectacular. So let's try again. Resource C is 100, and it's an increment of 40. So resource C, that should be an increment of 200, so it should come out to 300. And again, you can shut the notifications off if you want, but like I said, when you're first making a database, you really want to do this to make sure the results meet expectation. Because either the results, if they don't, either the results are wrong or the expectation is wrong. And go to supply, and sure enough, it's 300. Let's do resource D, which is 100 and 100. So resource D, let's do, say, 9. So it should come out to 1,000 then. That one's 1,000, and we'll do resource A. I like to skip around. Normally, I don't like to start at the beginning just to demonstrate that it's not just cascading down, because sometimes you can do that. You have it just going down the order, and so it doesn't work the way that you're intending. So 150. So let's do 2. So that would be 200. And there we go. And since this video was fairly short, I'll just show you a couple things. Like I said, I'm not too worried about desktop publishing, but if you select these and you move them down, I'm just using the arrow key. You can make things a little bit neater, like you can put a label up here, and you can do receiving, and you can change formatting for this. So if you go to format, select this, maybe you want it to be a bigger font, so maybe it's 20 points, and maybe you want it to be bold and underlined, and then you can just like grab these corners or these edges, and there. No, it doesn't look spectacular, but it looks a little bit neater. And that's what I mean. I really don't want to get into the desktop publishing because that's all subjective. Whatever layout you choose does not affect the actual functionality. It may make the workflow make more sense to your end user, but it doesn't actually change the functionality. Like this adds nothing to functionality. It just makes it look a little bit nicer. So let's go back to design, view, and now it says receiving. Okay, so I think that's it for this video. I'll probably do one more in this series because there was one more thing that they asked me about, and then it was about reordering. That one, we'll see what I can bring to the table, because when it comes to reordering, you really are going to want to be able to link out to your suppliers. Well, I don't have any suppliers, so I can only show you just so much. But at least I can show you the basics of running a report to show you if something's low, and I can show you how to link out, at least generally, to a page, and then you can modify that so it links out to the exact object that you're trying to order from that page. if even your supplier allows for that kind of access. So that should about do it then. If you have any questions, just leave it in the comments. So if there's something else you want to see, leave that in the comments. And I hope that this was useful, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your night.